B-side.
Welcome to the podcast, Chris from Muse. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How you doing?
Yeah, really good, thank you. What was the first instrument you learnt?
The first instrument I learned, it was actually, my mum and dad bought me some kind of weird organ for Christmas one year when I was about 6. And I've got this vague memory of learning how to play Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. And I was about 5 or 6 years old, and everybody was so impressed. I've got this memory of like having my organ carted into school and being shoved up on stage in the assembly hall in front of everybody, like wondering what was going on. And that was like my first experience of playing an instrument and performing in front of people, I guess.
So was it drumming then you picked up after that?
No, it was guitar after that. I think it was when we started in high school, and started having music lessons just as part of the curriculum, I guess. And everybody had an option to learn an instrument. So you could either learn piano, guitar, clarinets, things like that. And I'd always been really into guitar music. So as soon as the opportunity was there to play guitar, I took it. And I think that was my first experience of ever being genuinely obsessed with something. I was like, I don't know, I think it was almost like my first experience of love, Yeah. with a guitar. It was crazy, really.
So how did you go from that to being bass player in Muse?
So, I mean, it was a bit of a weird journey, because I started with a band with some other kids that were in my school year, and it was a 5-piece band with 2 guitar players, and then our drummer left, and there wasn't really anybody else who could play the drums, so I kind of put my hand up and said, look, let's go down to 1 guitar and I'll play the drums. And it became a 4-piece. And Matt and Don were in another band with the brother of our old drummer.
Okay.
So we all kind of knew each other and did gigs together. And Matt pulled me aside one day and said that he was starting a new band and that he didn't want to do cover songs anymore, but he was looking for a bass player who could do backing vocals. And because he'd seen me playing the drums and doing backing vocals, and he knew that I'd played guitar before that, he thought that I could probably play bass. I don't think I picked up a bass in my life, but I kind of figured that, it's sort of like a guitar, I'll figure it out. And I think the first time I ever played bass was the first rehearsal we had at the school. That was the first time I'd ever played.
What made you think, I'm just going to quit it all, I'm going to go with this guy Matt, and you just have a good feeling about it?
I was a bit reluctant at first, because I did say to him and Don that I didn't want to leave the band that I was in, because they were kind of like my best mates, and I'd kind of grown up through school with them. I've got this vague memory of Matt saying something like, you do realise you're going nowhere with that lot. We're going to do our own songs. This is going to be great. If you want a chance of making it, then you need to come and join us. So I said I'd join them if I could keep both bands going. And then I think I had 2 or 3 rehearsals with Matt and Dom, and I don't know, something was just very different about the way it all operated, and just the chemistry with the 3 of us, and it was just straight off the bat, it was just a level above anything we'd done before. And I think the fact that we were doing our own stuff just kind of got me excited, because up until that point, as much fun as it was, I was kind of getting a bit bored of Nirvana covers, and we were playing stuff like Ned's Atomic Dustbin and the Census Things and Mega City 4. That was all kind of fairly big at the time.
And of course at the beginning as well, you had different names, you had lots of different names. Where did these names come from that you went through?
Well, I think the first name was Rocket Baby Dolls. That was the first name that the 3 of us had. And I think that came from some sort of porn film that Matt watched. It was back in the days, remember like RTL, when it was the old school satellite and you had the German channels, and if you tuned in at a certain time, you got a nice little treat.
You come across something.
It was something to do with that, and then I think it was something on Sky or some old satellite channel, and then Matt saw something that was called Rocket Baby Dolls, and that was where that came from, and then pretty quickly switched to Muse.
Yeah, but what I liked about the Muse name was you chose it partly because it just looked good. It's just, 4 simple letters.
Yeah, we all thought like Muse, just 4 massive, great, simple letters with the 2 lines. Just really stands out. Once you've seen it, you can't unsee it,
But coming to you individually now, your bass playing, you're quite well known for using distortion on your bass. What made you start that?
I think when we first started, I think there was a lot of the rock bands that we listened to we're three-piece bands, so we listen to, you know, Rage Against the Machine, we listen to Nirvana. But the one thing that always kind of bugged me about three-piece bands, I always really liked the space in a three-piece band, but I always had this weird thing where when a guitarist kind of went off and, you know, did a solo or whatever, I always felt like there was this massive hole that was left in the sound. So I started messing around. I had this old amp, it was called a PV Bandit, and I borrowed it off one of my mates. I don't think I ever gave it back to him, actually. I don't know how it is now, but he lent me this amp, and I can remember having this pedal that I could kind of split the signal. So I kind of plugged my bass in and sent one signal to my actual bass amp, and then sent another signal to this PV Bandit. And I remembered like distorting the out of this thing, and then blending the two sounds together, and it was like, it sort of sounds like a bass and a guitar at the same time. It sort of fills that sonic space. And I can remember the next rehearsal taking this double amp rig in and showing the guys. And we were rehearsing in this, it was like a community centre in the next village along from where we lived. And it was, you know, horrible sounding room, just wooden floors, echoey, having this bass rig on full blast. And everyone was like, yeah, this is wicked. And, you know, I don't think many people were doing that at the time, you know, sort of making, I always just had this thing with bass. I liked playing it, but I always felt like it sounded a bit boring sometimes.
Is it because you were a guitarist first, do you think, that you tried to sort of evolve it?
Maybe. I mean, maybe it was that, and maybe a bit of ego where I was just like, I don't want to be heard, you know, I need people to notice me. So I think I just started messing around with stuff, and I think obviously once we got in the studio, particularly on the second album, I actually went into a three-way split for the second album, so I had my kind of clean bass amp, and then one amp with one distortion, one amp with another, and panned one to one side and one to the other. And it was almost like this complete sound all in one. It's sort of like you didn't need a guitarist. And I can remember that became a thing for a while, particularly, I think from Origin of Symmetry up to Absolution and Black Holes. We always had this thing where the band has to be heavy before the guitars are laid down. They're just the bass and drums on that. That's where the heaviness has to come from, because then that gives Matt the freedom to kind of go off and want to do what he wants without the band losing that heaviness, if you know what I mean.
Which Muse song features your favourite bass line and why?
God, it's a tough one. I mean, you know, I think Hysteria is probably one of the obvious ones. I mean, that song started life as, it is weird, it actually came about in a sound check in Doncaster, of all places. And Matt started playing, he was sort of playing the bass riff, but he was playing it on the guitar. And he was sort of playing it almost like a bit of a bluesy kind of thing. And we started jamming it out, and I think I added the 16th things to make it sound like this machine gun type thing going on. And then it became the bass line, and then Matt ended up having this other guitar part. But I remember at the time, I mean, even in the studio, we were really focusing a lot on the sound with that, and then we added the synth just to give it a bit of weight as well. And I guess at the time, that, you know, it was quite different. I mean, I don't think anyone had really done anything like that before. But I'd say, you know, Hysteria was up there. You know, I always used to really enjoy Stockholm, actually, because Stockholm was a real challenge to play. And it's not one of those songs you would immediately think as having like a crazy bass line, but it's really fast the way it goes. And it's always like a challenge every gig to get to the end of the first verse without my hands cramping up.
Yeah.
And then you get that little break for the chorus, then you've got to do it again.
But so you mentioned that Muse aren't signed at the moment. So is that what you said? Yeah. So what's the deal with that? Are you going to be signing with someone, or what's the sort of future for Muse?
Yeah, I mean, we will. Obviously, I mean, I think we're going to start work on the next record fairly soon. I think for the last few albums, we've been with Warner's, and we've just extended after each album. And I think you know, we may do the same again. We may go with a new label. Who knows?
So you're just looking at your options.
Just looking at options. Yeah. I mean, I think it's there's always that kind of natural break when you finish touring an album, and I think again because you know the band's been around a bit longer, so the gaps between albums get a little bit bigger. You know, I don't think we can be banging out new albums every 2 years like we used to. But it just kind of gives you that opportunity to just kind of reset a little bit and think about what's going to happen going forward. But I think from our point of view, you know, we can get on and make a record and then see when it's finished.
What's the time scale for that, do you think? When can we look forward to a new album, or when might you start working on it?
I think we'll start very, very soon, like in the next couple of months. We've got a few gigs in June. Only a handful. That's the only gigs we're doing this year. I don't think the idea is to do anything really serious until next year. So I would imagine, you know, 2026 will probably be a new album, barring any disasters or any sort. But,
and do you know what direction that's going to go in? Any clues yet, or are you just going to start from scratch?
Yeah, just start from scratch. Yeah, I mean, we've not. What's been quite nice recently, I think the last few times we've hung out, or a lot of the sort of personal times we've hung out over the last year or so, we haven't really talked about the band at all. So me and Matt have got kids of similar ages at the moment, so we've done quite a lot of family stuff and kids' birthday parties, and
I mean, we do need to point out at this point you do have 10 children, so
yeah,
it's quite a hectic life.
It sounds worse than it is. three of them are grown up.
Okay.
But yeah, we have a wide range of children from 25 right down to 3. So obviously I had 6 children in my previous marriage. My wife had 2 children in her previous relationship. And then clearly we thought 8 was not enough. And we thought we'd have 2 more.
B-side.
You've launched a new band called Chromes.
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
In one of my old houses, I had a studio that I had set up and started work on this. I was like, well, I'm going to do this solo project, and I'm going to, just kind of go and do something different for a little bit. And then, I don't know, I wanted to do it for a long time, but it was a bit of a weird thing where I just didn't quite have the guts to kind of really finish it off. And then I think I just got to the point where I was like, I'm just going to do it. And I think it was the singing thing that I've always found quite difficult to get past, because it is a different thing being a singer to being an instrumentalist. It's, you're kind of exposing a whole different level of yourself, lyrically and emotionally, I guess. So it took me a while to get over that. I still don't think I'm fully over it, and I'm not entirely. I was talking to my wife about it last night, and she said, "Do you think you'll ever go out and do it live?" And I'm like, I don't know if I can. I don't know if I could do it, but I like the idea that it's just this kind of cool little studio project that I'll just chuck little bits out.
Where did you get the name for that one from?
Where did I get the name for that one from? It was some sort of mishmash of my surname and my first name, I think, which is not very exciting or interesting at all. But I spent so much time trying to find a name for it, and you literally check every single name you come up with, and there's somebody else that's got the name. I think it got to the point where they were literally waiting, like, what are you going to call it? We need to put this out now. So I was like, that'll do.
And tell us about your bandmates, and particularly Kev the dog.
Kev the dog. Yeah, Kev's been like my doggy soulmate for about 8 years now. He's a little bit on his last legs, unfortunately, but he's he really is a man's best friend. That one, he comes and hangs in the studio. But yeah, it's not actually a band. It's basically all me at the moment. The only thing it isn't me was the piano, and Karis, my wife, did that. But yeah, I mean, I'd probably say over the course of the next year, I mean, there'll certainly be another handful of songs coming out. But yeah, I mean, the first 2 I just kind of very quietly slipped them out.
Right, you didn't want to make a song and dance
I didn't
fuss
want to make
about it.
much of a fuss, so I just kind of put them out, and initially it was kind of semi-anonymous, although it was on my Instagram page, but it could have just been a band that I liked, you know what I mean? But yeah, I just kind of slipped it out there and I didn't do any interviews or any promo or anything like that. And I guess, I don't know, I just had this weird kind of romantic idea that maybe word of mouth still was a thing. But it doesn't seem to be as much of a thing as it used to be.
I don't think it's anymore. I think you definitely need the internet. What advice would you give to a bassist starting out?
I think the same as any musician, really. I mean, I always feel that when you're making music, you have to be making music because you're in love with music. I've come across certain people along the years who, they have dreams of, their cliches being rich and famous, and some people get to be that, and some people get to be successful musicians but don't get to be rich and famous and all of that as well. And I think you have to do what you do for love of music, and you have to love what you do. Because I don't think you can really be successful as a musician if your motives are anything else. And I think you have to accept that, as much as you love it and as talented as you may be, it may never go anywhere, and you still have to be comfortable with that and love that.
Yeah. No, I think that's really good advice.
Bonus tracks.
First record you bought?
I can remember the first record I had. I'm not sure I can remember the first record I bought, but I can remember I got a record for Christmas. I would have been 4 or 5, and I've still got a weird memory of it. It was the Birdie song. Remember that?
Oh no! You bought it?
I don't know if I bought it or I was given it, but that's the. But I remember really loving it. I think I played it on that record player that we found at that house that we moved into. First, I think the first record I can remember buying myself, and in terms of like saving up pocket money and going and buying it, was probably In Utero.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
So I was 13 when that came out, I think. Bought it on cassette. Didn't even have a CD player at the time. It was an old cassette player. So that was the first one I bought, I think.
First moment you realised you'd made it?
I think the first time I realised something was going on that was like a real marker of something was the first time we went to France, and I don't think the first album had even come out, so I think maybe Muscle Museum had been released and Sunburn possibly. And at the time in the UK, we were still at that point where, you know, we might do a gig in London and 300 people might show up, but then equally we'd do a gig in Wolverhampton and 20 people might show up. So it was, depending on where we were in the country, we were far from successful at that point. We did this gig and 500 people showed up, packed the place out, and it was the first time I ever saw that kind of slightly hysterical kind of fan reaction where people were kind of losing it because we were just kind of pottering around in the bar in this kind of little dive bar type of place. And I can remember someone coming up and they had a pen and a drumstick and they I actually genuinely didn't know what they wanted. And then I realised that they were asking me to sign a drumstick. And at the time that was like, wow, this is the real deal. Like someone's asking me to sign a drumstick here.
Was that quite exciting? You're like, wow.
It was weird, but it was exciting. Yeah. I mean, it was like, because I don't think I'd ever seen that level of enthusiasm before. And, you know, up until that point, we'd done small tours in the UK, but like I said, people would come and watch you and they'd be like, yeah, man, that's cool. But there was never that sort of level of hysteria with it. We literally went from playing this free gig to 500 people to, 6 months later playing to 2,000 people, which, was big.
And then you walking out to that stage, the first time you must have heard a massive roar. What was that like?
Oh, it was amazing. I mean, it's the sort of stuff you dream of. You dream of as a kid, and you sort of dream about it. You didn't ever think it's really going to happen. So when it does, I mean, for me, like moments like that were just as important as, playing Glastonbury when we first headlined Glastonbury, which again was another moment that felt like a milestone. And we had one of the best gigs of our lives, it was absolutely amazing. And then equally, 2007 when we did Wembley Stadium, I mean, that was just overwhelming. I mean, that whole thing was, I don't know, I still to this day, when I think about that, we sort of came up on this thrust on the halfway line and I remember the cameras flashing, and it was like the old footage you see of old European Cup games that played at night and all the things are going off. And remember the intro music. I can remember walking down the thrust towards the stage, and it's like I wasn't even there. It was just the weirdest thing, and I don't know why, but all I could think about was like 8 years ago we were playing in the Cavern Club in Exeter, and now we're doing the first of 2 sold out nights at Wembley. Like, how the did that happen? And we'd already had this whole conversation before we actually went on stage, because we had noticed in the past that some of these bigger gigs that we did, if we did anything that was a little bit bigger than we were used to doing, there was always this tendency to get a little bit carried away. You get so excited, and then you thought it was great, but then you realise afterwards you've not played that well because the occasion got the better of you. But I think with Wembley it was just so important, and we had this whole thing where we said, look, the first 4 songs, just don't look at the crowd. We're playing to each other, got to zone it out. And I found it really difficult because I could be quite an emotional bloke at times, and I actually felt that walking to the stage. I almost felt this kind of almost like a tear or something, like how on earth did this happen? And then we did the gig and it was like, went by like that, and it was like, oh, it's finished. But then we got to do it again the next night.
But after that gig, I mean, how on earth did you go to sleep? You must have been on such a high.
I don't think I did. It was really odd because I think it was such a big deal for the family as well. I mean, I can remember booking out. I think I booked out 20 rooms in the, I don't know if it's still called the K West. Do you remember K in Shepherd's Bush?
Okay.
I don't know what hotel I don't know what it's called now, but it was called the K West back then. I think I booked about 20 rooms out for some of my family. So it was like my mum and aunties and uncles. And then we booked out an entire floor of the hotel at Wembley for like the secondary family. And it was weird. I can remember in the afternoon of the gig, I'd organised a coach for all of my lot to come up on. And it was the weirdest thing. So it was like doing a meet and greet with your own family, because everyone kind of came off this coach at the hotel, and I was like, hello, hello, hello.
Yeah.
And it was literally the most surreal thing, because it was like all my uncles and aunties that I've known for years, but it was like all of a sudden they were like fans.
Yeah.
And then at the gig, they all kind of came down, and everyone was all the families were in the royal box. And I can remember going up there, and my sister kind of came out, and she said, "You might want to go." And Mum's having a bit of a moment. She's crying. I said, "Oh my God, this I can't be doing with this." So I walked in, and my mum had literally walked into the royal box and looked out at the pitch, and I think Lily Allen was playing, and because she was one of the support acts, and she just saw all these people, and she just like broke down. And it's a shame, actually, because I think, we've done a lot of gigs like that since, but you can never feel that again.
Yeah.
And it's never the same doing it a second or third or 50th time. And it sort of would be nice to experience that feeling again.
Yeah.
So it is a shame you only get to do those things once,
Yeah. Yeah. What a wonderful memory.
Yeah.
Okay, favourite album by Muse?
I would have to say that from top to bottom, if I had to pick one that I thought was full of absolute bangers all the way through, it would probably have to be Black Holes, I think. I can remember with that album, when it came to like what's going to be the single, it was almost like anything off the album could have been a single. So many songs that weren't singles that I listen to now, I think, well, that could have been a single, that could have been a single.
Now, at the end of the podcast, we asked the guests to do a dramatic reading of some of their lyrics. So I've got the lyrics here for time is running out. I want you to imagine that the lyrics to this song make up the script to a Hollywood blockbuster thriller.
My acting skills are absolutely appalling. I think I'm drowning, asphyxiated. I want to break this spell you've created. You're something beautiful, a contradiction. I want to play the game. I want the friction. You'll be the death of me. You'll be the death of me.
That's lovely. That's perfect. That's actually really good. And lastly, best bass line of all time.
Tommy the Cat, Primus.
Okay, I wasn't expecting that. Okay.
Yeah, big Primus fan.
Well, Chris, thank you for joining me on the podcast.
Cool, thank you very much. It's been great.